residential tech talk, lighting specialist to residential tech
Welcome to Residential Tech Talks. I'm Jeremy Glowacki, Executive Editor of Residential Tech Today. On this week's podcast, Tom Doherty joins us from Palm Desert, California, where he is a director for HTSA Buying Group. If CEDIA had the equivalent of a Disney Legends program for its founding pioneers, then Tom would be in its inaugural group. He is literally one of the people there at the beginning of the industry's premier trade association, CEDIA Expo, and he's led an impressive career as an integrator and manufacturer, culminating in his current role where his vision has brought the lighting category to the forefront of the industry, and now AI as one of the leading topics of the day. With plans for the third annual Lightapalooza conference, which he was a founder of as well with HTSA, recently announced, I thought it would be a great time to have Tom on to give us an update on the event and tell us why you won't want to miss the event this coming year. Tom Doherty, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks very much for having me. Great to be here.
The CEDIA Legends program, I think we should create that. I think it would be, we've got the Lifetime Achievement and we've got the other programs that are really great. I'm fortunate to be a part of the fellows.
Yeah. You're a fellow, right?
Yeah. So I think we've probably got it covered, but I do think that there are a select few that are truly the legends, and Lutron does that, I think, right? That's sort of their.
They have they had a Hall of Fame, and I'm proud to say I was inducted in that inaugural Lutron Hall of Fame. That was 2009. So
nice.
Everything you're going to talk about is things that just happened eons ago for me. I'm an old man these days. I used to be one of the youngest in the crowds that I ran with, but now I'm kind of AARP.
I'm gonna tell some things because it's good to be just like authentic and real on these podcasts, and in the end, it's probably just my dad listening anyway. But when when I was told of your inaugural CEDIA Expo, someone, and I would tell you who it was if I could remember who said this, said they remembered you being on the show floor. And I know it was just tabletops. It was pretty modest then and all that. Maybe it was year two. And you were so happy with the success of getting this thing off the ground that you were on the show floor and you fired up a doob on the show floor. And they said, Tom, you can't do that. You've got to be professional. This is like a real thing. And I know like it's legal now, so we can talk about that. It's statute of limitations and all that. But I just thought that was a funny image, and it seemed to be fitting. If it were not true, it at least was a good like legend kind of story.
I don't recall that. I would not deny that happened. I I learned something later in life when somebody said, Tom, inner voice, because I was never afraid of saying things and being exuberant, and especially, I was 30 then and probably still behaving like I was 18 or 19. I remember those days and being really fired up about stuff like that. And, there's lots of stories, but I've always thought of myself, not as a rebel per se, but, my early adult years were during the new wave punk rock scene.
Yeah.
So, I went to those kinds of clubs and I was rebellious. My dad was a history professor, so I, studied the American Revolution and, the Renaissance and the things that happened in Europe. And there's too long of a story, but the transition from those tabletops to full-blown expo was inspired by me seeing slabs of the Berlin Wall and seeing those slabs in Dallas, Texas. When I was there, it was going to be the third CEDIA Expo. I had gone to at the time it was called the Lowe's Anatole. Now it's the Hilton Anatole. where we coincidentally had the first Lightapalooza a couple of years ago. But I was there in 1992. We just had the second one in San Francisco. This next one was going to be in Dallas. And we were really struggling as an organization. We were about out of business. We had negative cash, and myself and another gentleman who was on the board with me, we were doing calculations with the very earliest spreadsheets and the earliest computers. There's something called VisiCalc, and we were trying to project what it was going to take to get us in the green. And the big part was the next trade show can't just be 10 by 10s. This industry is big enough now that we need these manufacturers to bring real booths so that we can charge real show floor fees. And he said, while I was there, there's an 80,000 square foot convention thing connected to the hotel here. You want to go see it? And as we're walking over there, literally are slabs of the Berlin Wall that had only fallen 2 years earlier. Mm-hmm. And that inspired me because that was a revolutionary thing. Mm-hmm. And for that to fall, and I still had some punk rock, new wave, anti-establishment things in my veins. And I committed to that space without telling my board.
Oh, jeez.
This is like May, and not telling the management company, which was the Rebido Group at the time, mm-hmm. Pre-Rayborn Group. And that summer, I was just on the phone calling Sony and Sonance and AMX and everybody. Hey, would you bring your Chicago CES trade show booth to CEDIA? And that is what kept the organization in business. Otherwise, we were out of money and we were going to have to shut down. CES was circling to maybe acquire us, like they ultimately did to Para. And so I'm saying a bunch of stuff that a lot of people who are watching this have zero idea about.
No kidding.
But that literally happened, and maybe I did it. I probably wouldn't have done it in Texas. If I did what you said, it would have been in San Francisco. For sure.
There you go. You're a little scared. Don't mess with Texas, right? Back then, or maybe even today. So that's amazing, and it makes me have panic sweat just thinking about that moment in time. That, I mean, obviously you had your own things going on, but this was like a passion project for you, and you would be really depressed to see it go away so quickly if it went bankrupt. But it's impressive, and that the vision that you've had all along. One of the things I love is that here you are, one of the, don't take this the wrong way, elder statesmen of the industry at this point, but you don't just look back. You look back and you reflect on nostalgia and good memories and the history, and it's great to see all that, but you're still looking forward, which is the most important thing, because I think you are still young at heart. So you're still seeing the future and what we need to be doing with whether it's lighting or AI as the current ones. But, just a little bit more reflection though. Can you remind folks about kind of where your career path took you as a business person outside of the CEDIA founding part of it? You had you had a great business really focused on lighting control as one thing. You also were pretty involved in a big manufacturing opportunity there for a while. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah. So the foundation of my passion and life still is about music and film. I love cinema. I love film. I love music. So I come from a pretty well-educated family. My dad, again, was a history professor. I got some smart siblings, and I'm the oldest. But I was told I was on Ritalin as a kid. I remember, getting in lots of trouble in school by just screwing off. And I didn't do well in college. I dropped out and for the opportunity to work at a hi-fi store. Mm. I wanted to be around the equipment. I didn't want to, I had no passion to be a salesman. but I just wanted to talk about hi-fi gear to people, to anybody that would listen. So I, as a lot of people know me, know how tenacious I can be about things. I like to think about it as being passionate. Some people think of it about me, and I've been called a pest before, because I just don't give up. So I finally, brought, a hi-fi store down to their knees to hire me. And so I started working at hi-fi stores. And then I would go to these punk rock clubs and new wave clubs. And for whatever reason, I couldn't get to work on time, even though we opened the store at 11 o'clock. So eventually got fired from that store.
And pause real quick, because you and I both are Indianapolis natives. I live in Carmel now. You used to live here. Where were you specifically at this five?
I grew up on the west side. I grew up on the west side of Indianapolis. I went to Northwest High School. There was back then 38th and Georgetown wasn't so. Well, I'm not going to say it's bad now, but there was a lot of businesses around there, and there was a store called Crazy Larry Stereo.
Oh.
It wasn't Crazy Eddie's in New York. It was Crazy Larry's in Indianapolis.
Okay.
So that's where I worked. I learned a lot there. I was pretty successful. I just, was irresponsible. And I would, if they would have had the opening hours at 9, I would have shown up at 9:05. But since it was 11, I was getting there at 11:05 and 11:15. And they eventually said, you need to leave. So quickly, I had to move back in with my parents. And the short story is I got a job working for one of the very first video stores. And it was up there at 96 and Meridian. There used to be some stuff there. And it was called Video Visions, I think. And so that was all about selling first generation VCRs to wealthy people in Carmel and renting videotapes. So it was the first time, somebody that could plunk down $1,200 on a VCR, which was going to be a doctor or a lawyer or some wealthy person up there, and join a video rental club and be able to pick up Airplane for the weekend and with their family, put a tape in and watch a movie. And so that was my first introduction to clients, because prior to this, the customers in a hi-fi store were all about, they were hobbyists, they were about specifications. You had to battle against the competition on what the total harmonic distortion of the receiver you were selling versus the Dixie Hi-Fi across the street. And here, they didn't know about any of this stuff. They just wanted to plug it in, put a tape in, and be entertained. And that same customer also was very low technical capability, and hooking up VCRs for some people just wasn't straightforward. And that introduced me to clients saying, hey, I'm having difficulty. I'm 21 years old at the time. And I said, well, I can come to your house and hook it up after I get off of work. And so I started doing that for all these people around Carmel. And then, well, can I get it to play on another TV? And I would figure that out, go to Radio Shack, buy the parts. And then I started learning how to drill in a crawl space, because they have crawl spaces in Carmel. And I was kind of doing some initial installation. But I really, 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 really wanted to work at a hi-fi store again. And so I bugged a company called Hi-Fi Buys. They evolved into Ovation in our market, and they were the thing. And I got a job there the same month that I was getting married. And so I got married, I got a job there, and I just dug in deep and became the top salesman at that store with all these veteran guys back then. We had 7 stores. I was number 2 in the chain. They hired me because of my experience with VCRs and TVs, because that was the next new thing that hi-fi stores were doing. So I was just a little ahead of the curve then. Did that. The story could go on forever, But the thing that got me into custom installation was while I was working there, and Bang& Olufsen had come out with the very first multi-room audio system that you could sell. What was cool about them was that they were like the only company that had a remote control for the hi-fi. And not only could you turn the thing on and adjust the volume, there was one button. If you press phono, the thing would come on and the turntable would turn on and the arm would come over. If you hit tape, then it would lift up and the tape deck would start playing. And that was cool. But they came out with this thing called the Master Control Link in, I think, 83 or 84. And what it allowed you to do was hook up this 7-conductor cable and run it around to different rooms and hook it up to a box and then hook it up to a pair of speakers. And it had this little IR sensor and buttons that essentially allowed you to have music in different rooms in your house off of your hi-fi. And for me, A, I thought it was magic. And B, it was like, mean I get to sell 3 more pairs of speakers to the same guy? Because it's like speakers is the most profitable thing.
Yeah.
And so I went ahead and installed it in our showroom. We had, one room where the system was. And I said, okay, let's walk in this other room. And I would say, look, you can turn on the stereo. So imagine this is your bedroom or your family room or your porch. And I started to sell it to people, and then it was like, well, how are we going to install this? Because at the time, I really didn't know how to get wires around a house. I mean, it was one thing to hook up a coax to a couple places, but this was going to be more complex. And there was somebody right off of Township Line Road that was remodeling a house, Jerry Carl. He invented Sensormatic, which was the sensors that prevented people from taking clothes out of Paul Harris stores in Glendale. And then it went, so all those tags. So this guy had all this money. Speaking about weed, he had this secret room that you moved a bookcase. And I think he had a book, and it was like, some psychology book. He did that, it opened up, and that's where he would smoke weed.
Okay.
So anyway, he said, don't worry about it. Just drop the stuff off. My electrician will pull it all. So he did. I didn't know what I was doing. I said, pull it all to the attic. And then it was, okay, time to hook it up. And I'm like up in the attic, sitting in this insulation and soldering all these connections together.
Oh,
but it worked. I had music in 4 areas. And then I just started evangelizing Bang & Olufsen and selling a lot of it. And to speed this up, I met somebody who ended up being a mentor. His name's Ron Gerwig. He was the very first Wendy's franchise from Columbus, Indiana. He used to babysit Wendy. And he met me, and we got to know each other. And one day I asked him, I don't know what I'm asking for. I don't even know how to ask it, but would you put me in business? Because what was happening was the hi-fi business was becoming really commoditized, where we started to have Highland and Fretters come into the market, and then people would show up with a newspaper ad and want me to match price. They didn't want to talk about, they didn't want to use my knowledge. They didn't want me to help them understand why they should have a Nakamichi cassette deck or this, that, or the other thing. It was more like, can you match the price on this receiver? And I was like, well, I'm not a clerk. I don't want to be a clerk. I like working with, affluent clients and being their, essentially their concierge, and then execute. And so Ron put me in business. I started Tom Doherty's Custom Audio and Video there on 200 West Carmel Drive in 1985. And then there's lots of history after that, but that's what got me into custom install. That's when I became a Sonance dealer direct. Audio Access came along, and that got me to then show up at January CES and June CES because I was a business owner and I needed to see new stuff. And that's how I met Frank White and Chris Stevens and Dave Donald and all these people.
Wow.
And pretty quickly, after a year or two, you'd start to see the same people who were, you got the same issues that we have. Manufacturers won't sell you direct Sony TVs or Adcom amplifiers, and so we just all got to know each other to the point where, we were seeing this as a growing opportunity. Everybody's business was growing. We all had the same problems and challenges. And I became noteworthy because here's this kid from Indianapolis, where do they even have electricity? And here we are in New York and in California, and Tom's the number one Sonance dealer. I was the number one Sonance dealer for a couple of years in a row in audio access. And so I had credibility with Ellie Dingberg at Audio Video Systems in New York and these other dealers. And then, when it was time to, we really should form our own association, it was just kind of natural that I was a leader in that and helped put that together. So that's a long story.
No, it's a great story, and there's so much to cover there. You've got such a history, but I got to the industry much later. I jumped on in '96 or so, kind of touching on the industry from a distance editorially, but then launched the CEDIA Daily in '99. So that's when I really kind of fell in full on into it. And we launched Residential Systems in 2000. So I was kind of playing catch up, and I was specifically told by a consultant who was working with us on our launch that I should look at other people besides Tom Doherty and some of those original people, because we needed to be different. So I'm going to admit to you now for the first time that the reason why I might have been weird around you for a while is because some consultant who I really respected told me that you were the old school, and now it's ridiculous now that I look at how visionary you have always been. That was the advice, but I saw the point, I guess, at the time, and I was too naive to just say whatever. I'll do whatever I want.
It's fresh blood is always a good thing. That was one of the reasons why I didn't make a career being on the board. Not to disparage anybody else that did that, but I had been advised by somebody long ago who I respected at Sony, who his name was Brad Kibble. He was a Lifetime Achievement Award recipient posthumously.
Posthumously.
Yeah, thank you. I said, man, Brad, you can never leave this job here. We need you. We need you as a connection to Sony through this custom channel. And he said, Tom, you never want somebody in the same position all the time, because you're not going to get fresh ideas that way. Or it's hard. It's more likely you're going to have fresh ideas if you can have fresh blood. So I stepped off the board. I think in 92 or 93. It's like, okay, I served for 4 years. Get some other people in here.
Yeah.
And then I got back on it in 96 and went to about 2000, then got off again. But I don't fault that person for saying, Tom's sucking too much oxygen out of the room, get some other perspectives, And I also I've always been, to some people, a little controversial. I recall that I remember Keith Rich being mad at me. He was president for a while, and he was a real leader in the whole automation thing. And I had always been, apologize for this in advance, a doubting Thomas on automation, because I was always struggling just to make our client systems work and be reliable with simple things like AV.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I do not want to, automate life and death systems. I don't want to be on, if their security system doesn't work because of some failure or trying to automate all these sprinklers or whatever it is. It's like heat, mess with people's HVAC.
Yeah.
This is back then.
Sure.
And so I said some things that were fairly negative about that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas at the time, those newer board members, and particularly Keith as the president of CEDIA, was all about that. And here's Tom Doherty saying things negative. So a lot of people, I even remember Julie Jacobson, she did an article on who the top integration companies were. and left me off the list
Mm.
and purposely said why I was off the list, because Tom doesn't do home automation.
Okay.
And so, yeah,
That's funny.
I, you know, I don't always fulfill the narrative.
Today's episode of Residential Tech Talks is brought to you by NICE, the global manufacturer of smart home, security, and building automation solutions. NICE is bringing together 30 years of innovation with award-winning products to create a holistic ecosystem for builders, integrators, and consumers. Learn more about how you can create one home with one solution at go.niceforyou.com/RTT. So, speaking of changing and moving on, what was the point, or what happened that you left integration and left your company and became a co-founder of Escient? Or were you co-founder
Well,
of
I
Escient?
kept my company.
Okay.
I kept my company. Essentially, the quick story is, almost all of my clients over the years, my customers were mentors to me. They were always successful business people. Got a lot of advice from them, looked up to them. And I had this one customer move into a house that I had wired, and Scott Jones,
Mm-hmm.
and he was originally from Indiana, but he went to Boston, MIT, and he and his team, he is credited with inventing or patenting voicemail
Mm-hmm.
for the Bell companies. So he moved in. I met him. I had been working on what we called Tunebase at the time. My brother-in-law and I, my sister Nora, had started a company that was building custom library management systems. So we had a computer and a touch screen connected to, at the time, Sony had a 360 disc commercial changer, Pioneer had things, NSM had things, and we were making software that would allow you to, access your CD collection and automatically play it. Way long story about that. So Scott Jones moved into town. I met him, and he was the first person that was a client that was a high tech guy. And I kind of worked with him and kept him up to date and asked him for advice on this software thing that we were doing. And one day he was remodeling his house, and let's talk about a theater. Hey, why don't you? I'll take you to a job. So we're going down 116th Street. I pick him up, and my car runs out of gas because I'm just running everywhere,
Uh-huh.
and I forgot to fill up my car. And so we're on the corner of 116th and Ditch.
Mm-hmm.
Is what Ditch? Is Shelbourne, 116th and Shelbourne. And so we're standing on the corner. I had a cell phone. Called my office, says, you need to get a gas can over here quickly. But we were on, he was kind of laughing about it. And then we finally got the gas. I showed him the theater of some job I did in Bridalborn. And when we got back to his house, he said, what was significant about voicemail was the convergence of telephony and computers. And I see, Tom, the future being there's a convergence happening with the convergence of, there's an opportunity happening with the convergence of the internet and entertainment. And I'd like to be your partner. So I got this guy saying he wants to be my partner. I'm like, hell yes. So we worked it out where we formed Escient with my brother-in-law and my sister, and we kept Tom Doherty Inc., Architectural Audio Video, as a company within the umbrella, and then we just started leveraging his cash and smarts in developing and productizing what we were hand building, and we, he was there to help try to, at the time, what was happening is fellow dealers around the country and my colleagues who were doing Rush Limbaugh's house and Larry Ellison's house, they would sell them on this Tunebase library management system that we sold to them. And then we'd get these complete CD collections of these people's collections. And then we would manually build these databases because there's no database.
Mm-hmm.
So we would scan all the covers and we would type in all the tracks and titles.
Wow.
And then we'd ship them back, working systems. And so Scott was like, I think I can figure out how to automate this. So we worked on that. Short story is later we stumbled on a CDDB who, a couple college students in Texas had learned that, you can play a CD in Windows 3.1. I got a CD-ROM on my computer in 1995, 96, 97. This is before Windows 95 comes out. But you put your CD in and you can play it through your dorm room speakers. But it doesn't tell you the name of the track or the album. And they're like, well, why is that? Well, because none of that information is on a CD. What's on a CD is a table of contents. So how many tracks are on that disc and how long is each track?
Okay.
And from there, they wrote an algorithm that allowed you, if you typed in the information onto this server, the next time anybody connected to the server put that CD in, it would auto-populate. And so they started to build this database. We got hip to them. We started talking with them. They were just students. And we were like, well, we want to buy it or we want to license it. And I thought I had this off. So way long story. Short story is Sony eventually wanted them too. Sony's approach didn't match their vibe. Ours did.
Okay.
It was funny. So we bought the company, and I happened to be in San Diego at a Sony event. And Scott's calling me and saying, you need to find a fax machine because I need you to countersign this document because we just bought it. And then I later heard that the people that I knew inside at Sony were just like, when they heard they were turned down and we had bought it, they were like, and there's a lot of stuff that went in there. So I spent the majority of my time with Escient, but still we owned Tom Doherty Inc., and that was a continued going concern. Okay. And then ultimately, lots of stuff happened. We spun off Tom Doherty Inc. Bain Capital ended up buying Escient, which was D&M Holdings, bought our company. My brother-in-law, who did all the initial work, Chris Commons, is still there.
Oh.
And now he was acquired by Sound United and now Massimo. But Chris has been there since the time I recruited him from the Naval Warfare Center in Indianapolis in 1993 to come and help me figure out how to do this CD library management thing. And, more and more stories. There's a million stories.
Well, we'll catch on more of these at another podcast, but we really need to get to the Lightapalooza conference, and I think that's really bringing us up to current day. And it's been a great conference. I've been to the first two. Right, we've had two so far. Am I losing track? Yes,
we had two. Yes, we had two. The first one was in Dallas, February of 2022.
An ice storm hit. It was great.
And completely by coincidence, at least initially, was happened 30 years after we did CEDIA there at the same hotel.
Yeah.
And the slabs were still there. And so the second one was last year.
Okay.
And this will be the third.
Yeah, and the difference from an attendee standpoint, press person standpoint was, great evolution day, or show 1 to show 2, and we've got the third one scheduled, and you've got an agenda out with the schedule. I told you when we spoke recently that I quickly scanned the days to make sure I had not been assigned a panel to moderate. Still willing to do it if you need me. I did that last year. It was great. One of the highlights of my career was Jason Knott, my competitor at the time. Now he works for D-Tools. Told me it was one of the best panels he'd ever been to. And I said, well, I will make you repeat that several times throughout our friendship, but Tom put it together. I just moderated. So we'll really give Tom the credit on that one. But so what did you learn from the last two, from all your feedback that you've put through the Chat GPT to analyze and want to make this even better than the first two?
Yeah, the second one benefited from the first one's attendees telling us, what they really liked, and the attendees meaning the integrators, the reps, and equally or more important, the manufacturers, and say underwrite everything that ever happens in our industry in terms of conferences and expos, and um, and so the improvements that we made last year that people experienced were based on the feedback in the first year. So last year I had the benefit of 700 plus people attending and sending out 700 plus surveys, and I got 200 back. And almost all of the constructive suggestions for improvement I anticipated because I was hearing some of it during the event. I mean, by and large, people were really, really happy and energized by the event. The things that we could improve on, that we did improve on, were just a handful. But one of them was make the courses descriptions or somehow convey that this course is good for somebody new to lighting. This one's an intermediate level, and we'd like to know about some advanced ones. Mm-hmm. Because some people are coming multiple years and they want to, take more advanced or more intermediate courses. We knew we were going to have some newer people. So, okay, these people have never been there before, should, have good descriptions and know what the course is about and the level. And they also ideally wanted us to convey who we thought it was good for. Because, I'm looking at this, should I send my tech, my project manager, my lighting designer? Is this good for the owner, the finance person? Who's this good for? Mm-hmm. And so we put in the descriptions, those sort of things. So we do have 3 tracks on lighting training or lighting design oriented training: beginner, intermediate, advanced. And we went ahead and named some of the other presentations that were more business oriented. This is a business track. How do you, what are the metrics for this, adding this category, and so on and so forth. Maybe come back to the education. The other one was, the manufacturers were like, hey, we need lead tracking, So, okay, we didn't have badge scanning last year. We need to have it this year. Mm-hmm. A lot of people were like, hey, there weren't enough seats in the class I wanted to take. And so I was standing up. And that one was unfortunate because we purposely said, okay, you need to register for a class. And then I would look at it and go, there's like 120 people registered for David Warfel's class. All right, let's put them in a classroom where we have 144 seats. Mm-hmm. And then 180 people show up. Yeah. So this year, again, we'll require registration, and we'll have badge scanning, and I felt like one way to be more predictive of who's going to show up for the more popular stuff, or not necessarily more popular stuff, but I felt like, okay, we need to like at CEDIA and like at these other lighting shows, and I've been going to AI conferences. They charge something for a course. Mm-hmm. And so we decided that, okay, well, let's just price this, half or really low of what's typical. So, some of the courses are $25, some of them are $50. David's doing an 8-hour, his team put together an 8-hour basic introduction course, although it has hands-on lab sessions in addition to lectures. It's limited to 48 seats. We're doing it twice, and that's $200, which is also about half of what like the ALA charges for their sort of thing. Mm. So trying to be, some people are like, hey, everything was free last year. And it's like, well, The first year it was $750 to attend, and 225 people did that.
Yeah.
Last year we had a graduated increase in fees depending on when you registered. They went from 100, and then in December they were 150, and in January they're 200, and in February they're 250, and people just kept registering. In fact, our industry are expert professional procrastinators,
Yes.
and probably 50% of the registrations last year happened in the last 3 weeks.
Wow.
So a lot of the people paid $250. This year I've kept it. It'll be $100 to register all the way through November, which has ended, and December, and we'll increase it um, in January to 150.
Okay.
And we'll probably increase it again in February to some number. So those are the adjustments. The other adjustment we did was we've added power for education, and additionally some power exhibitors. And we, because of the demand and interest in the channel or the show or this conference, now we're at 51 or 52 exhibitors, and last year maybe 4 of the manufacturers took 20 by 20s, and now we have, like Lutron, for instance, is bringing a CEDIA level display and a 30 by 50 footprint. DMF is at the front with the 20 by 40. You can go online and see a really impressive. I'm very proud of the curated list of vendors that are embracing the CI channel now. I mean, it's been years to educate the traditional spec lighting industry that the CI channel was the future of their vertical. But I've been through that before, convincing manufacturers 30 years ago why custom installation was an important future in a different vertical channel than traditional brick and mortar specialty audio video stores back then.
Yeah,
So,
I like how you use the term curated, because as you explained to me in a previous conversation, you don't just accept any lighting manufacturer that wants to become an exhibitor. You really want them to have already made the effort and the investment in the CEDIA channel and understand what custom installation value there is versus just the next company out there that thinks that this is the thing to follow. They've got to actually put the effort and the investment in to be a part of this, right?
yeah, and we're gonna continue that. Yeah, I've had, early on I was turning away people that didn't fit the profile, hadn't made the investment, really didn't have any visibility in our channel, and so no. And then later on, unfortunately, I had to, tell people, hey, we're full, so we're sold out, and we're not going to put people in the hallway like the earliest days of CEDIA. There were, the conventions back then. There was a time when CEDIA was so huge, based on the spaces that we had. It's like, well, we can put you in the hallway,
Yeah.
and you can set up a 10 by 10 there. So we're not doing that. First and foremost, this is, I will endeavor and work with people that help me with this, that this is first and foremost, and I'd like it to be more like a professional conference where people go to learn and hear from speakers and such, and have an expo component as part of it, but it not being the tail wagging the dog where the show floor controls what this is about. I hope that to be.
Yeah.
And to that end, and keeping things curated, we're going to convey to the exhibitors that are there this year, okay, and next year, you're grandfathered in. You can be here. And then any new exhibitors will form some sort of committee, and they'll have to apply. And I won't get blamed if they don't get in. It'll be some unknown hidden committee that does that.
Yeah.
But we'll come up with fair fair way that where we make these judgments. But yeah, not looking to grow the show floor for the sake of it, and really would rather reward these vendors who have invested in this channel for years and give them an ROI and not have the show floor diluted by just opportunistic manufacturers.
But yet, you're evolving sort of the scope a bit with the power companies. So explain why you feel like it's important to include some of those manufacturers of power products.
No, that's a great question. It's a fair question. I've had a couple manufacturers, and I wasn't anticipating this. I thought, in my mind, I made a great justification for it, I thought. But I had a couple manufacturers go, okay, well, where's this going, Tom? Is this becoming CEDIA? Is it TVs and speakers and everything else next? And I said, well, no, yes, it's always been promoted as lighting, 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 and nothing but lighting. That was a tagline for the first 2 years, being lighting fixtures, lighting control, natural light control. So, okay, motorized shade companies, lighting design services. I did have catalyzing and One Firefly and Matt Bernath of Vital last year, and there's a repeat of that happening this year, because they were, their services are valuable to the channel, and they were there to focus on helping the people that were attending there on their new lighting initiative. So that's the primary thing. So saying all that, I, having moved from the Midwest to California, I just started to, a couple things. I had seen Joe Piccirilli, I don't know if it was 15 years ago or how long ago it was, at CEDIA showing Rosewater for the first time. And then, of course, we saw Sonnen a while ago, and then you see Savant Power. So you see that this is a new emerging category. It's been there for a while, but I had just a much more sensitivity, and then at the same time seem to be noticing a lot more interest in this. You see Ryan Downhauer importing solutions that are power related. Jimmy Paschke's with them, Surgex, TPD. And I think that power is where lighting was 5 or 6, 7 years ago, in that we're starting to have more and more integrators look at this category, or thinking about it, or wondering about it. I have a sense that what we need now is education. We need some fundamental electricity education. Most integrators don't understand what a kilowatt or what a kilowatt hour is. They know what a decibel is, and even with lighting, what the inverse square rule is on lumens based on ceiling height. They know all kinds of stuff now related to that. But power, you start talking to them about, they can't really wrap their heads around it very well. And it is, I'm convinced, for a lot of markets, the next narrative to have down, that is going to get you into jobs even earlier than what lighting does. And so I felt it's a foundational category. It's a growing future category. It's a category that requires education. And we have some significant players that serve in our channel, like Savant Power, like, Rosewater, and Bright Vault, and on and on and on. So that's why I added it. And so that was my sense. So since then, registrations for sessions have started, and there's about 43 sessions, not including manufacturer trainings, that are happening. And 3 of the top 10 most registered courses are the power related ones. So my gut, I think, was correct, that there is, at least amongst the integrator channel that attends Lightapalooza, for the most part, the most advanced, most forward-thinking integrators. Those are the ones that are coming here, and that population has made it obvious to me that that's an important topic that they want to know about. So we've created three different courses that are happening there. There's like a basic introduction to electricity. Then there's a panel discussion with four of these manufacturers kind of talking about how these things all interrelate. And then we have like a kind of a working case study on, what is a power plan? What's the narrative? What do you need to know? What do the deliverables look like? Here's an integrator who's going to share what their process is, what their drawings look like, how these things price, what it takes to commission them. How do you talk to an electrician? What do you need to give an electrician to install this stuff? So, I don't have any, so we have outdoor lighting.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had some people say, like last year, well, we have outdoor lighting. Maybe we can have some outdoor lighting demos, and then we can have some outdoor TVs and some outdoor speakers. And I have no intent of doing that. And we want to keep it focused. And then, we'll get through this year and see what the surveys say about how we did and what we need to keep doing, what we need to stop doing.
Well, I definitely agree that it's the next wave to focus on in the industry. And you don't think about it in its connection to lighting, but you can make the connection to lighting. And it's like the next wave after that, maybe healthy home. And even that you can make the connection to lighting, because part of a healthy home is a healthy lighting plan, so you are dealing with human-centric lighting, that sort of thing. So it's funny how you can sort of say the emerging technology trends in the CI channel still can be associated with Lightapalooza without that name not meaning anything anymore.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I agree with you on the healthy home and the lighting part, but it's kind of like I have Crestron, I have Josh, I have Savant, I've got Control 4, I've got Basalt there. They're all automation, or they have all control solutions.
Mm-hmm.
But they all understand that you can only have things in your booth and your messaging can really only be about how your technologies, either what you specifically directly offer, like Crestron has a light fixture and they've got a motorized shade and they've got lighting equipment, but they can't have any DMX. They can't have any video distribution or all their other stuff there in the booth.
Yeah.
And that's the same conversation. Josh, talk about how your system integrates with lighting control systems and shade solutions.
Yeah.
And lighting fixtures.
Mm-hmm.
And so with trying to stay, and very difficult to keep people in the box, how do I think, healthy home. So let's have some people, teach and lecture and talk about healthy home from the lighting standpoint, but I don't want to have, water purification and air purification at the show.
Exactly.
Because then, all of a sudden it's like feature creep.
Yes.
Now, ultimately, I don't know how long I'm allowed to be the czar on this thing. But that's kind of, while I'm the czar today, whether I'm that tomorrow or years from now, that's my vision, that I think the power thing fits under it in this way. And I guess you could argue it from many angles depending on what your position is. But the lack of real knowledge and expertise by a lot of integrators prevents them from really weighing in on some power decisions that happen on the projects where they're putting equipment in. And there's some things they can deal with. But, what we're hearing is, in some instances, generators are getting installed as the client's power belt and suspenders approach if the power goes out. Yet they're not being installed sometimes in a way that prevents them kicking on, generating a square wave, and knocking out the drivers in these expensive lighting fixtures. So there are drivers and things that are failing out there. So we think that this education is important, and we think that it overlaps and is related, and we think that, you can, depending on your position, you could have a bunch of different arguments. Right now, I'm sticking that power fits in Lightapalooza, and I am committed to not have it grow outside those edges.
Well, and not that this is ending on a light topic at all, but AI obviously has been a big focus for you since the special session at CEDIA Expo, and then at HTSA as well, with the continuation of it, the fall conference, which was an amazing content edition there. You've got some AI represented in Lightapalooza as well, so make the case for that as well, other than it being the next big thing that we all just need to understand. How does it fit in with the lighting category and lighting?
Yeah. Well, I'm I'm a little aggressive when I listed that on. We do, Ron is going to do an AI thing. I do have ESAR listed in the faculty. I'm not sure. When I put this together, it was like, okay, yeah, we need to do some AI things. And I was, and it's not that we may or may not still do this. My sense is that um, there's that AI, either with a lot of work right now, you can maybe do something to, I was thinking maybe by March, there will be design tools that will allow you to do some AI lighting layouts in an automated way, or first passes. And so I was thinking maybe we can figure this out and do some initial demonstrations of where it is today, where it might be going. I've been working in the background here in my home office on some of these AI APIs and some of these GPTs. I've been experimenting with taking large databases of manufacturers' fixture configurations. Um, Lighting fixture part numbers are really, really long because they describe all of the variable features, from housing type to trim shape to trim size to baffle finish to trim finish to driver configuration to lumen output to beam spread to adjustability. It's like this, like that. And I've been experimenting with um, teaching the AI how to read and interpret these codes, and seeing if I can say, okay, I need you to generate a fixture spec for 5 fixtures labeled F1 through F5, fixture 1 through F5. And I want it to be wet location, 60 degree, blah, 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 blah. And this one is da, 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 da. And now go look at this 100,000 line Excel file and populate it with the correct part number and the price. And if I can get that to work, which I've been having, 2 steps forward, 1 step back for a couple weeks, playing with this on and off. These are big time save. There's a lot that you have to do and learn and manage. And selling lighting is the easy part. Not that it's easy. The hard part is project managing it, ordering it, commissioning it, dealing with the construction site, and so on and so forth. And you can go cross-eyed, and if you have any dyslexic tendencies in your body, in your brain, you can make some pretty unpleasant mistakes because of these length of part numbers and looking at these things. So I know that AI will have an impact on the workflow for integrators, and so that's what I was originally thinking when I was putting this thing together in July, and then August. We ought to have some discussions about AI. Right now, what's solid is what Ron is doing on the schedule, and Isar and I are still trying to discover if we have something worthwhile instead of just waving our hands up on stage.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, even if you don't end up doing as much there, you've got plenty to keep people really excited and occupied and learning about the lighting category. And Tom, I appreciate all of this great retrospective stuff, and also the looking forward to the conference. And thanks for your time today. Really had a good time talking.
Thanks for having me, and I apologize to the audience for rambling on. It's hard for me to. I tried to tell myself, like right now, short sentences, Tom, but I just can't do it. I can't.
It's okay. You got a lot to tell, so thank you so much for sharing. And we'll do this again, and we'll cover that the other half of your career that we didn't even talk about. So.
Okay, great.
Tom Doherty is director of HTSA Buying Group. Lightapalooza is scheduled for February 26th through 29th at the Renaissance Phoenix Glendale Hotel and Spa in Arizona. You can learn more about the conference and register at lightapalooza.com. And that wraps up today's show, which was produced by Residential Tech Today, IPW, and Pretty Easy Podcasts. You can check out prettyeasypodcast.com if you want professional and affordable production help on your own podcast. And if you're new to Residential Tech Talks, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you watched or listened to this episode. Also, check out all the latest residential tech news at our magazine's website, restechtoday.com, where you can also subscribe to the print or digital magazine and to our Tuesday and Thursday email newsletters. Until next time, please stay safe, stay inspired, and let us know if you have a great story to tell.
Residential Tech Talks, autonomous lighting specialist, residential tech.
Home automation, smart device, home or smart house.
This show was produced by Pretty Easy Podcasts and made possible by listeners like you. If you ever thought of doing your own podcast, please visit prettyeasypodcast.com.